that and more with the A-plus panel. Democratic Linden Councilman Peter Brown, Republican strategist Alexandra Wilkes, Dustin Rasiopi, State House reporter for NorthJersey.com and The Record, and Dan Casino of the Fairleigh Dickinson University poll. It's all ahead on New Jersey Now.
I want to be perfectly clear. The pressure to pass a millionaire's tax will intensify and not lessen if it is not included in this budget.
Good afternoon, I'm Diane Doctor, and welcome to New Jersey Now. It's been a heck of a week. The weather, New Jersey Transit, the hair, the bad hair, and the budget. The state has a budget. I'm sure you all know that. You've been paying attention to it, right? Right. Well, these folks have been paying attention to it, my A-plus panel. It's a budget that's been passed by Democrats for a Democratic governor. So you'd think he'd be happy and he'd be willing to sign it. But no, it's Democrat versus Democrat in Trenton. Dustin Rasiopi from the State House Bureau of the Record and NorthJersey.com. You've been following all the drama. What is going on?
The Democratic legislature sent Governor Murphy a roughly $39 billion budget, and they say that it has about 95% of the governor's priorities in there, but that other 5% is really crucial. It's notably missing the millionaire's tax, which the governor has been campaigning for and wanting for years now.
This is a tax on the people who make over $1 million. It raises the tax levy to what, about 10%?
Almost 11 on income over $1 million. So every dollar you earn after $1 million, it would be taxed at that rate. Democrats, many of whom are up for re-election this year, they don't want to have anything to do with it. And the vote totals when they voted on it showed that there's no appetite for the millionaire's tax. So it puts Murphy in a little bit of a bind. He can either roll over and say, okay, I'm going to sign it, or he can, stand against them and break out his veto pen.
Peter Brown.
Yes.
What side are you on, and what should the governor do?
Well, I do support the governor's budget when it comes to this millionaire's tax, because the premise of him and the reason why he wants this is to directly address property tax relief. This is something that every politician in Trenton talks about, every local official talks about, is addressing property tax. So his promise was this millionaire tax was going to directly address property tax of roughly about $250 million.
He was going to give everybody back, what, $125, $150? That was into a property tax?
And for most people, that may not seem a lot.
That may not even cover a cell phone bill in most households.
True, but the frightening fact is that we also forget, I know from the local level, our seniors. We have seniors who, for them, that may make up a difference in them eating or not. I mean, that's something that we see affect on the local level. So, property tax relief is something that the legislature has gotten away from.
Okay, Alex, Republicans are just watching this all and enjoying it.
With some popcorn for the intra-party fight here. Look, I think that this budget tells us two things. I think it tells us, number one, that after 18 months in office, that Governor Phil Murphy is a pretty feckless leader. This is a man who has not been able to figure out how to effectively use the levers of power that his office affords him in order to get some of his progressive wish list through, which is maybe some welcome relief to me as a conservative that he's not able to get that through. But I think it really speaks to, his political prowess and lack thereof. I think that the second thing that this tells us, too, is where Murphy's priorities are and how out of step they are with the reality in New Jersey. This millionaire's tax is a disaster. New Jersey already faces one of the highest tax burdens in the country. The out-migration rate is outstanding to this state. And Governor Murphy still wants to add yet another tax that, while the millionaire's tax has a nice ring to it, sounds like a space on a monopoly board, but we're not playing with monopoly money. We're playing with real people's money in the state that's already being overtaxed and not spent well. And so I think that, he's a little tone deaf when it comes to how much this would affect small businesses. Don't forget, a lot of small business owners run their income through personal income. So this would, not just affect the so-called fat cats out there. This is really something that would hit a lot of New Jersey families hard.
You got me feeling sorry for the millionaires right now. Dan, does the governor really speak for the majority on this?
On the millionaire's tax, he certainly does. When we millionaire's tax. There's about 70% support in New Jersey for the millionaire's tax. Now, that might be because people don't fully understand what a millionaire's tax is. It sounds good. But honestly, that is about as much as normal people generally engage with politics. Boy, that sounds like a good idea. Let's support that. So Murphy does have the public on his side in this. The problem is he doesn't have other people in the state legislature. And this has become almost a proxy war for this war between Murphy and Norcross. And that's really what all of this is about.
Well, we introduced a name that we haven't mentioned before, George Norcross.
Right. So this is a political boss in South Jersey who's most commonly associated with Camden. And he's currently in a fight for his life with Phil Murphy. And a lot of that has come down to persuading people in the state legislature to go and make sure that Murphy doesn't get a win, to hurt Murphy's political capital and therefore indirectly benefit Norcross.
Okay, I'm going to ask Dustin to pick up on this. The Norcross feud, how much of that factors in, do you think, to the way Democrats are voting?
I think it's a huge factor because Norcross is the Svengali of a huge swath of the Democratic Party. He's a lifelong friend of Senate President Stephen Sweeney. He controls a large block of South Jersey lawmakers, and it's an inter-party war, as everybody's alluded to, and it's really Murphy versus Sweeney / Norcross.
You know, I think it's really funny because the state of where the Democratic Party is nationally, certainly, and I think Murphy and his, all of his progressive friends would like to think that they're so progressive, so woke, and here we have two old white guys fighting on, how to spend the state's money, our money, basically benefiting their friends.
Old white guys.
Yes. and so, I think that that's just sort of comical in all of this, that, for as far left as the Democratic Party, purports to be and how enlightened they purport to be, this is really what we're talking about here in New Jersey. But again, I think it really speaks to, where Murphy's priorities are in terms of, fighting this battle. And was this the battle he really wanted to take on? Does he have the stomach for it? Does he the political capital to really be in the trenches with this battle? I don't know that he does.
And he found himself in it almost accidentally by just looking under the rock at the Economic Development Authority.
Well,
Peter, I see you over there raising your hand.
And for me, as someone who's worked down in the state legislative aid and as a local official, I view it differently. Representing, people on a local level, now you start looking at policy and people, how it directly affects residents. When you talk about the state budget, we talk a lot about the politics and how it's going to affect politicians and millionaires. But then what about the real problems and quality of life issues that everyday residents want to get addressed? When we talk about education, when we talk about infrastructure, New Jersey Transit, this is something that the budget was trying to address that we've gotten away from, that greatly affect people and policy decisions. And I think this is why the governor's having a hard time, because while he's trying to address these issues, New Jersey Transit, infrastructure, we're talking about the millionaire's tax and political bosses and making sure that they're getting rich.
Well, I'm not sure that he's addressing New Jersey Transit by adding the extra $50 million, in which he didn't do. That came from the other side. And I would argue that it needs probably 10 times that before it's a functional agency, and it's in a crisis mode. So I would respectfully disagree on New Jersey Transit that that's being taken seriously by both parties at any level right now. So I'm advocating for it. But on this issue of the governor's Democrat versus Democrat, the governor's portraying himself as a reformist. He's a reformer, a reformist. He's got the progressives behind him. But is that, and I guess I asked Dan this, is that really the voice of the voter in New Jersey, or is that just a fringe area? And can he really build a majority on that?
He can leverage that, because the primary elections are going to force, in general, to the extent you have competitive primaries in Jersey, which is a lot, but they are going to force legislators over into their force Democrats to the left, force conservatives to the right. And so there is some of that, but there's not a lot. The problem with the liberals and the progressive wing in New Jersey is they're very tightly geographically concentrated. So if you're in the 27th to 28th legislative district, you've got a lot, and you have to worry about that. If you're not, it's not something you really have to worry about. So it's a small number of legislators, and those legislators are still subject to all the same pressures everyone else is. They want to
versus Democrat. It all really stems from the Economic Development Authority, the EDA, and an investigation that's been launched into the EDA by Governor Phil Murphy and his Attorney General, and a task force that's been appointed. And why is it so important? It's because the accusation is that George Norcross, the South Jersey Moss has taken advantage over the years of the tax credits that have been afforded by the Economic Development Authority. In other words, they've just sort of run wild with it, and everybody knew about it and everybody looked away. I think that's probably a good way to describe it for you, for the audience. And why should you care about it? Well, you should care about it for a lot of reasons. It seems to have stopped the budget process. It seems to have come to a head this week with the task force report. Dusty, can you provide us with some details on that?
So the task force that Governor Murphy appointed issued a lengthy report, 75 pages, and it focused almost exclusively on Camden and the companies that are connected to George Norcross. And the main two takeaways are that this was a system that was designed by special interests, and those special interests benefited from it. There was also problems that the EDA lacked controls, and there were a lot of red flags that were missed.
And this goes back before Christie even, right? This agency has been around for years and years under many different governors.
The agency predates Christie, but the law that was passed by Democrats and signed by Christie and used by Christie, you know, that was from 2013 actually through now.
And there was a smoking gun, too, in the task force, wasn't there? A bit of one?
Yeah, there was an email from a Cooper University Hospital executive asking a real estate broker for a document that he's asking, can you just show that we're going to move to Philly? We're actually not going to, but can you at least provide us that so we can provide it to the EDA? So that just goes straight to the heart of the argument that this was really a scheme. That
they really had no intention of moving, but they needed to somehow show it in some way, shape, or form.
That's part of the program, is you have to show whether jobs are going to be affected, whether there's going to be a risk of you leaving the state, so they can calculate the award based on that.
Okay. Peter, now, this is now translated into a heavy-duty schism in the Democratic Party and trouble for both sides. The governor. Do you think the governor knew what he was getting into when he started looking into this?
I think absolutely not. I mean, you talking about the governor, he's not a career politician like some of the other ones that are down there who've been around for decades. And so now, just imagine, he's now starting to uncover one thing to another thing to another thing. I think he has a fiduciary responsibility to the public to talk about these issues, and some type of reform is needed in the state.
Alex, what happens now with all of this if we throw out the baby with the bathwater? In other words, if we don't continue these tax credits, isn't that bad for the economy, bad for business?
I think that would be a mistake. I think that this is a state that faces a huge problem when it comes to people leaving the state, businesses leaving the state, and you need to have incentives in place to attract the businesses to stay. I'm certainly not going to sit here and condone the waste, fraud, and abuse that this report obviously uncovered, but I would sort of add a caveat here that we're not looking at a cylinder, we're not looking at a bridge to nowhere. There's actually been progress in Camden, and there's actually been businesses that have been recruited to stay in the state as a result of the EDA. So I don't think you should throw out the baby with the bathwater, but I think that Governor Murphy should consider, what can he bargain for this investigation? That's something I don't think that he's really done very effectively. He hasn't extracted any of basically his progressive wish list from Steve Sweeney and George Norcross in exchange for maybe support of the EDA, maybe sort of taking this investigation a little bit more lightly. I mean, as a political maneuver, I'd have to question sort of his judgment on it.
I wonder if they're watching and listening to you. Sounds like good advice. Dan.
Look, the real scandal here always in New Jersey is not what was illegal, but rather what is legal. And this is a law that was written by special interests.
Absolutely.
And those special interests then took advantage of that law. The reason we've been talking about one company in particular, Holtec, is because that's the only company we can find that actually did something illegal, that they didn't check
allegedly
a box.
illegal.
That they didn't check a box they were supposed to check, and now they admit, oh, it was a mistake. I mean, that's 260 million tax credits. But the other hundreds of millions of dollars in tax credits that probably shouldn't have been awarded, that weren't really bringing in jobs, well, guess what? That was all totally legal, totally above board, because the people who benefited the law are the people who wrote the law. So what's the solution to this in the long term? You need to, nobody likes to hear this, you need to bring in more legislative aides to the state legislature and pay them more so they're making more money working for the state than working for the special interests, and write the laws for the state legislature rather than for the special interests.
So the law firms don't have to write the law for the state.
And that's a huge problem. This should be a red flag to everyone that we're bringing in special interests to literally write the laws, because no one in the state legislature has the expertise expertise to actually go ahead and do that. And then we're just looking the other way because this whole thing is set up to funnel money to these special interests and to individuals. The money's there to funnel up, so of course no one's going to investigate it. People are shocked that people are taking advantage of this law when that's the only reason this law exists in the first place.
But they're not really shocked because everybody knew what was, it didn't, ostensibly everyone knew except for Governor Murphy, apparently, that this had been going on for years.
Well, everyone was getting their beak wet. Everyone was getting something out of it, and so everyone was going to shut about this. Now for Murphy, who comes in from an outside, this looks like a good government issue. Hey, this is an agency that's not running well, that's not running effectively. Let's look into this, see what we can do well, not realizing that there's a reason the agency was not doing what it was supposed to be doing. It was there to funnel that money.
Wasn't this also timing beneficial to him because he was in the middle of the Katie Brennan scandal, right? The scandal over the young lady who accused one of his campaign aides of raping her, got a great job, the guy got a great job, nobody knew who hired him, and he was able to divert attention.
Right. On one hand, that was nice timing for him, but on the other hand, it was terrible timing because now look, now we can't get anything done. Marijuana is not going to happen. He can't get his budget. There's no millionaire's tax. His agenda is completely derailed because of this.
Well, there were some bills that they did pass this week in Trenton, and we'll talk about them when we come back. Next, it wasn't all budget and EDA, the other bills that back now, and first to Dustin for a quick update on the School Development Authority story that he's been following and reporting on so aggressively.
We had written a story recently that the ethics officer there came out and said that she reached Governor Murphy's office back in November, well before anybody had written about it, and told him that there was improper, possibly illegal hiring. Based off of that, Senate President Sweeney said that the legislature is going to investigate Murphy hiring on a broader scale, which is actually something that the legislature had formed a select committee to do months ago, but it focused almost exclusively on the Al Alvarez issue.
Right. Katie Brennan.
So now it's going to, in some fashion, the legislature will return to the broader issue of hiring in the administration.
Okay, we'll be hearing a lot more about that. And there were other bills that were passed this week that didn't get as much attention because of the budget. Dan, give us an overview.
So I think the most important bill, the one that's going to have national implications, is actually the smart gun bill. So smart gun is one that, like your iPhone, opens up when you touch it, recognizes your fingerprint, so no one but the legal registered owner can do it, and it stops accidental shootings. In 2002, New Jersey passed a law that said once smart guns are available in New Jersey, within 3 years, that's the only guns New Jersey gun stores are allowed to sell. Now the problem is that there, first off, weren't any smart guns available in the market, and that law basically made gun manufacturers say we're not going to market any smart guns because once we do, that's all you're going to be able to sell in New Jersey. We're going to lose all those sales. So that has essentially stymied the development of smart guns for, at this point, 15, 16 years. And this year we actually got a repeal of that law, and what the new law in New Jersey is going to say is once those smart guns are available, and they're still not because of New Jersey's previous law, once they're available, every store in New Jersey is going to be required to sell them. So at least you'll have to have one of those available. That's important because that means smart guns are now going to be available basically nationwide, as the law that prevented them is going to be going away.
Okay. And there was a bullying law, too, an anti-bullying law that was passed?
We've got anti-bullying laws. We've got laws about Uber. There's actually a lot of kind of good government laws that are going in here that really have gotten lost in the shuffle.
Alex?
Well, I'll comment specifically on the Uber law as someone who's a regular Uber user. Of course, this stemmed from the case that where the college student got into an Uber got into what she thought was an Uber mistakenly and was tragically killed. I think Uber itself took steps to remedy this situation. You'll notice now if you call for an Uber, you get a reminder to check to make sure that the license plate matches the license plate that's given to you in the app. You have a picture of the driver, you have a description of the car, but certainly I think that the law which requires that the cars have signs in them, I don't think it's a bad thing for the marketplace, and certainly this is something that I think a lot of Uber drivers were doing anyway because it's easier to identify, or for your passenger to identify you as you approach a car on a busy street.
So, Peter, these are things that the governor can claim credit for, at least. For the short term.
Absolutely, the governor can claim. And these are, if you hear a theme here, these are quality of life issues, that the governor can put his hat on. But the difficulty is he able to communicate this out to the public when all you hear is this investigation, and budget problems. So it's going to be difficult for him to be able to let people know about some of these great laws that have been passed.
Right, and I couldn't do this show, of course, without mentioning New Jersey Transit. This is just a particularly terrible week. The changes that kicked in this week on the Montclair-Boonton line that forced people to go to Hoboken instead of into the city 2 nights in a row with terrible delays. One at fire down by the track, the other one just, wires down. It's always the usual excuses. Nobody really believes them anymore. If you're listening, Governor Murphy, I'm speaking for the 250,000 people every day that ride the mass transit. I really think that just attacking some of the low-hanging fruit, the broken buses that leak, we see the pictures on social media, the train scheduling that seems like it's out of whack with reality, cancellations that occur hour after the train is supposed to be there or never occur at all, leaving people frustrated. And some of the pictures that we saw on social media this week, I mean, Les Miserables looks like a picnic compared to the pit, what the commuters call the pit at Penn Station. So I know everybody here shares in my frustration. I know a lot of you do, Governor Murphy and your aides, if you're listening. I think it's time for a change at New Jersey Transit. And I think the public would really like to see some expression from you of action. That's my editorial for the week. Thank you all for being here. Great panel, great discussion. I'm Diane Doctor. Have a terrific day.